into Masters of the Genre, where I, Cardinal Sin, take you right to the source of the most important genre creators of their generation. Authors, actors, directors, science fiction, fantasy, comics, film, and other creators that shape our genre fiction and entertainment. Get ready to leave the world of the everyday behind and go head to head with the masters of the genre. Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin, and we have a very special show for you today. Welcome to Masters of the Genre with the HP Lovecraft Historical Society. And we have with us today Andrew Leman and Sean Branney. Andrew Leman grew up in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, in a large family that owned a publishing company. He was surrounded by books, graphic design, and handcrafting from an early age. Fascinated by the 1920s/30s, he is one of the founding members of the HP Lovecraft Historical Society and has produced a number of literary, film, theatrical, music, prop, and gaming projects there with his longtime friend and collaborator Sean Branney. He wrote and directed the first HPLHS student film, The Testimony of Randolph Carter, directed The Call of Cthulhu, and co-wrote and co-produced The Whisperer in Darkness, which is my favorite movie. He co-writes, produces, and performs in the Dark Adventure Radio Theater series. He co-created the HPLHS musical sensations A Shoggoth on the Roof, 2 albums of Lovecraftian holiday music, the jazz vocal album Ogham Wait, live at the Gilman House, and the Curious Sea Shanties of Innsmouth, Mass. Leman earned his MFA in acting from the University of Illinois and has been... It jumped on me, sorry. On professional stages in Chicago and Los Angeles. He greatly enjoys reading for the HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast and being an occasional guest host. When not pursuing any of these many other occupations, Leman is a graphic and type designer, and his typographical work has been seen in books and on movie screens, Trader Joe's products, and billboards nationwide. Sean Branney was born in Englewood, Colorado. He received a BFA degree in theater from the University of Colorado at Boulder. He then moved to Southern California to attend the California Institute of the Arts, where he earned his MFA in acting. He founded Theater Banshee in Burbank, California with his wife, Leslie Baldwin, and produced and directed many theatrical productions, winning awards for acting, directing, and producing from the Los Angeles Drama Critics Circle. With his colleague, Andrew Leman, he founded and continues to run the HP Lovecraft Historical Society in Glendale, California. With the HPLHS, Sean has co-produced the films The Call of Cthulhu and The Whisperer in Darkness. Sean adapted The Call of Cthulhu for the screen and directed The Whisperer in Darkness. He's been a writer, performer, and producer of 24 feature-length 1930s-style radio dramas for the acclaimed series Dark Adventure Radio Theater. He's also co-written and co-produced a variety of Lovecraftian musical projects, including A Shoggoth on the Roof, A Very Scary Solstice, An Even Scarier Solstice, and the Curious Sea Shanties of Innsmouth, Mass. He continues to explore new ways to share Lovecraft's cosmic horror with new audiences. In addition to his Lovecraftian pursuits, Sean regularly plays ice hockey and plays with his chinchilla and 2 dogs. He's delighted to be Leslie's husband and Aiden's dad. Welcome, both of you, to Masters of the Genre.
Hello there.
Glad to be here.
Very good to see you. And I would like to bring on my expert co-host, Walter Bosley.
Hello, I don't know about did you say expert?
I think you're an expert, yeah.
I'm the number 4 guy here, so.
Well, we're glad that you guys are all here. So let's go ahead and jump right in. First of all, I have to tell you both what an honor it is to have you on the show. I'm a lifetime member and a big fan of your work, whether it's making prop documents for games, movies of Lovecraft's work, or your podcast, Voluminous, and there's much more, but we'll touch base with those as we go. Let's start at the beginning. And this question is for both of you. When did you get involved with the HP Lovecraft Historical Society and why?
I got involved the second it was formed. I had never heard of HP Lovecraft until the night Sean invited me to come over to his house and play this crazy game, Call of Cthulhu. So that was my introduction to the works of Lovecraft. And the first game we played, I think, was Keith Herber's Fungi from Yuggoth, wasn't it, Sean?
That's right.
And it was the most fun gaming experience I had ever had. And
you're not talking about this one, are you?
Well, yes, I believe we are.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I mean, the 1986 edition of it.
Maybe that's in here somewhere.
Quite possibly. It was a separate supplement. I might have it on the shelf over here. But in any case, we all thought it was hilarious fun, and that's how I got started reading the works of Lovecraft, and it all went horribly out of control from there.
So you actually played Call of Cthulhu before you read Call of Cthulhu?
Correct.
Interesting. Sean?
At least that was my experience. Now, Sean did it the other way around, I think.
Same question for you, sir.
Yeah, I was introduced to the fiction through my weirdest friend at the time, a fellow named Daryl Touchton, had read an anthology of horror stories that had Lovecraft's Rats in the Walls in it, and was like, "Oh, you got to read this. It's so strange." And I had read it, and I was delighted and hooked by the fiction. And another friend had given me the original Chaosium box set game of Call of Cthulhu, so it seemed a natural next step to start playing the game and trying it out. And then all of us being theater kids, we were like, well, this is fun sitting around a table rolling dice, but it'd be even more fun to put on some costumes and go to cemeteries and play the game out in the real world. So we developed our own system of LARPing, live action role playing, where we took these games, but we staged them in the real physical world. And we had so much fun doing that, and the various folks that we dragged in to play with us had a good time, that eventually we came to the conclusion that we should form a group or something about this. And so finally, about 1986, Andrew and me and our friend Phil Bell sat down and decided, okay, let's make a society and help us share the fun with other people.
Absolutely.
And this was all well before the internet existed. I think, well, we all had computers, I guess, but
the internet existed, the World Wide Web did not.
Yeah, and so we never heard of LARPing. We thought we invented LARPing because we had never heard of anybody doing live action role playing before. So we called our version Cthulhu Lives, and
that's the name of the URL.
Yes, that's exactly. So yeah, Cthulhu Lives was our first group creation, and little did we know that it was gonna dominate the rest.
Take over our lives.
And I just wanted to mention, what you see behind me is not something I just had framed with glass last night. This has been part of my background since I've had a background. So nice. That's what a big fan I am of you guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sean, how did the society get its name?
Well, this is a good example of how things spun horribly out of control. So we had been playing these during our college years, playing these Lovecraftian LARP games, And we were putting them on left and right. Andrew put one on one weekend, and 2 weeks later we'd put on another one here and there. And we happened to be doing one on the campus at the University of Colorado at Boulder. I don't really remember the story very well. Back in those days we were doing these things left and right. But I know this particular one involved a lot of ninjas. So we actually had a bunch of guys in ninja suits literally dropping out of trees, and it does turn out ninja suits work. When you wear one, you are truly invisible. It's remarkable. So remarkable that it somehow got the attention of the campus police there, who came flying up in cars with their lights on and hopping out with guns saying, "Who's in charge here?" And of course, everybody pointed at me and said it's his fault. And so while I was being frisked on the back of a police car, they asked what we were doing, and I said, it's a historical reenactment by the HP Lovecraft Historical Society.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a ticket.
That's a get out of jail free card as far as I'm concerned. So the name sort of
self-respecting cop, yes.
Yeah, a cop feels bad about taking the Historical Society kids to jail. You know, a fraternity guy in a ninja suit, that might be trouble. But the historical ones, well, they must be okay. So we got a stern admonition not to do that anymore. But the name stuck. And so when we decided we needed to sort of formalize our organization, that seemed like an obvious title for it. And we've been more society than historical for a while, but historical is finally catching up and getting its due nowadays. So it's a little bit of everything in there.
One of the questions I wanted to ask you, sort of right off the top, just from my personal perspective, has to do with your podcast Voluminous, in which you read the correspondence of HP Lovecraft and point out, I think interestingly so for his fans, that he wrote in correspondence kind of like he wrote his fiction.
Yeah, Lovecraft, we ended up naming the podcast Voluminous because he was one of the most voluminous letter writers in the history of the world. Certainly in the history of the United States, it looks like he's probably number one. And he wrote vastly more correspondence than he ever wrote fiction or essays or anything else. And so, we had spent much of our adult lives playing in the sandbox of his stories, but because he documented his own life in such exhaustive detail, it really gives us a very interesting window into who the guy was and what he thought on any number of topics. So we've been exploring that through the podcast, and soon we'll have a set of books coming out that are related to it as well. So awesome. Yeah, it's been an interesting dive into a whole other side of him that we never paid as much attention to as we did the fiction.
Can you both, not at the same time, obviously, tell me how this effort with Brown University came about to help purchase the correspondence from a private collector, and then when the private collector's price was met, it suddenly changed, and what you did after that. Take us back to the beginning of that and tell us how that happened and how your involvement affected that and that of the members of the HPLHS.
Take it, Sean.
Well, I'll start. You dive in wherever you like. So it's estimated that Lovecraft wrote around 90,000 letters during his lifetime, which, if you break it out, he didn't live all that long. So that works out to almost 15 a day.
He lived to like 47? Right?
Yeah, he lived to be 47, and he would have had to have written 14 letters a day every single day of his adult life in order to have written that many letters. And, some of them are postcards, but some of them are 60, 70 page handwritten, double-sided letters. I mean, some of them are very significant enterprises just in a single letter. So the letters, the actual physical letters, his August Derleth and Donald Wandrei, who were friends of his during his lifetime and after Lovecraft passed away, they had the genius idea to contact all the different correspondents of Lovecraft's that they knew about and say, hey, if you have a drawer and have some of Howard's old letters to us, send them on over. We'd like to type them up and print. We're going to print one book of his letters. And that was a pretty successful campaign. And they were deluged with letters. I think they had like 23 binders full of these letters, and they kept coming in and they kept typing them, returning the original manuscript to the original owner. And then out of all those binders full of the typescripts, they published a 5-volume set of Lovecraft's selected letters. Now, the actual manuscripts of letters, some of them never made it into this collection at all. There were people that Derleth and Wandre weren't able to reach, and there were other people where either the entire collection of letters never made it to them. It was just sort of a complicated case-by-case basis. And later, as Lovecraft went from being an obscure figure that nobody had ever heard of to, by the end of the 20th century, pretty well being a household name, original Lovecraft manuscripts became very valuable and sought after by collectors. And I don't think we know who. I don't know who. Do you know who, Andrew, actually ended up with the long letters?
I don't think we know the name of the person who actually owned them. A bunch of one of Lovecraft's main correspondents and friends and collaborators was this fellow Frank Belknap Long, a younger kid who lived in New York City. He and Lovecraft were in business together as revisers of other people's fiction. And there are a lot of letters between Lovecraft and Long, but we don't know how, but the original manuscripts of the letters to Frank Belknap Long ended up in the hands of a private collector. And at some point, that person wanted to sell them. And they were handled by this a rare book and manuscript dealer named Lloyd Curry. And it was a set that was available for sale, but the price was beyond the reach of any. Most normal people do not have enough money to buy them all.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, and they were only being offered as a collection. S.T. Joshi, who is one of the probably the preeminent Lovecraft scholar in America, wanted to try to acquire them and put them into the John Hay Library at Brown, where a lot of Lovecraft's other manuscripts and papers and letters are kept. But ST couldn't afford to do it on his own either. And I think we volunteered to help out, didn't we, Sean?
Yeah, so it happened in passing. You might be familiar with the works of an author named Willem Pugmire. And Willem passed away a couple years ago, and Willem had acquired a pretty great library of horror fiction, genre fiction, a lot of first editions. It was just an excellent library. And he appointed S.T. Joshi as his executor with the thought that ST could liquidate this library and use the funds to buy the set of letters between Lovecraft and Frank Belknap Long. And he did that. ST liquidated them and raised quite a bit of money, but it wasn't nearly enough to buy the whole collection. So he had turned to the publisher, Derek Hussey, Hippocampus Press, and Derek's publishing company has been publishing new collections of Lovecraft letters. The ones that were originally published starting back in the 40s were just heavily edited selections from Lovecraft's letters. But the ones that Hippocampus has been publishing, they'll publish word for word every letter that
unexpurgated.
Exactly, unexpurgated. You can find out exactly what Lovecraft had to say to Correspondence X. So Derek joined the fundraising effort, and still between them, they didn't have enough money. And ST had mentioned this just in passing, and I turned to Andrew. I said, "Well, what if we see if we can fire up the membership of the HP Lovecraft Historical Society? We don't have enough money sitting around to do that, but $20 here and $100 there from the thousands of members of the society might be able to push this over the edge." And so ST was like, "That'd be great," and got in touch with the folks at Brown, and they were like, "Hey, that'd be great." And a fundraising campaign went out, and we raised a whole bunch of money, and then apparently the seller said, well, sorry, you guys. Once Brown approached them and said, hey, we're ready to make the acquisition, they said, oh, well, too much time has gone by and the price has gone up. So
it should be mentioned that because Brown was technically the purchaser of the collection, the owner, the seller, had offered what he or she considered to be a discounted price in the first place because they were selling to an educational institution. This private collector, if they had been selling to Nicolas Cage or somebody, the price would have been higher in the first place. So
Right.
The price was what they considered to be reasonable because they were selling to Brown University. But because all the shenanigans took so long, by the time Brown, and that was another tricky thing, is that ST and Derek and the HPLHS, what we had to do was donate the money to Brown, and then Brown had to turn around and buy the letters from the collector. So
Sure.
it was all lots of flaming hoops to jump through to make it all happen. But yeah, we thought we had reached the goal, and then they moved the goalpost.
Right.
And we had to keep scrambling.
Well, I'm proud to have been at least a very, very small part of that effort, and I'm sure the rest of the membership in the HPLHS are. And
we're very grateful to everyone who participated, and it is. I think I can speak for Sean in saying that we feel a real sense of accomplishment that we were able to play a part in securing this collection and putting it in the John Hay Library so that everyone can now benefit from reading these letters.
and it came about $20 at a time. There were a few people who were able to give more and did, but we cannot emphasize enough how important each $20 contribution made, because it was a whole bunch of those that made the entire deal possible. So yeah, it was a group effort, and one that we are very proud to have helped collectively put something together that should have long-term benefit for the whole community, whether you donate it or not. So
yeah.
And how has that impacted Voluminous?
So far, it's been we really only, the collection took a while. Once Brown got it, they had to scan and digitize all the letters. So far, we've only actually done one episode that was specifically about a letter that was in this new collection. But there's lots and lots and lots of letters that. New source material that's available for us to do shows on.
That's great. And for our viewing audience, where can they find the RSS feed for your podcast?
If you go to hplhs.org/voluminous.php, or go to our webpage at hplhs.org, and there's a drop-down menu that's productions, and one of those productions is Voluminous, and click on it, and it'll take you to the webpage for the current episode, and at the bottom of that page is a little gallery of all the previous episodes. We release a new episode on the first Sunday of every month.
And how many have you done so far?
What's that?
How many episodes have you done so far?
This month's episode is number 72.
Oh, my.
Yeah,
Well,
and they're available anywhere you get podcasts.
You can
all
also
major podcast aggregators feature Voluminous.
Where all good podcasts can be bought.
The webpage has a little bit of that bonus content for every episode. We do pictures and extra information for the episode. The audio portion of every episode, like Sean said, can come to you anywhere you get podcasts. But if you go to our website and look at the page for Voluminous, you can see all the bonus stuff as well.
I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk about this, your black and white silent film, Call of Cthulhu.
I remember
Could you
that.
please tell us how that came about?
That was so many years ago. We had made, it's like 20 years ago or more, Sean, right? That
Yeah,
we made Shuggoth on
2002, I think. Yeah.
we had made a film called Shuggoth on the Roof that was just like a 10-minute mockumentary short about what the disaster that happened when an amateur theater group in Los Angeles tried to do a stage musical based on the works of HP Lovecraft. And we made this movie for fun, and we submitted it to the HP Lovecraft Film Festival up in Portland, Oregon, that's been going on every year for a very, very long time. And it was accepted, and we went up and had a great time at that festival. And one of the other movies that was playing, I don't know if it was playing the same year as ours or one of the subsequent years shortly thereafter, but also playing at that festival was a short black and white stop motion puppet film called The Old Man and the Goblins that was done by these two very talented animators who I think are here in Los Angeles, Mark Caballero and Seamus Walsh. And they had done this stop motion puppet film in the style of like 1918, like the old German expressionist black and white silent puppet films. And it was spectacularly fascinating to me.
It sounds really cool.
It is
cool.
And it's only 4 minutes long or so, but it's a delightful, creepy little Lovecraftian tale of a creepy old man who lives in a creepy old house, and the goblins come every night and do unpleasant things. But seeing that movie, I think, gave us the idea that if we were to tackle the Call of Cthulhu in the style of the 1920s when the story was written, we might have a chance at actually making a movie version of that story that would work in a way that no modern day color version would be likely to work.
Because this was a previously unfilmable work.
Yeah, a lot of people had considered that story to be just inherently unfilmable. It's got a really complicated structure. It's got a great big monster that's supposed to just blow your mind, and non-Euclidean architecture, and no human characters that anybody cares about. There's a lot of obstacles to making the movie version of the Call of Cthulhu. But that puppet film started the wheels turning on what if we did it the way it might have been done during his lifetime when it was written. And so we just started thinking about that, and there you go. That's how it got started.
And I have to say, we're going to get to our chat here in a little bit because we have lots of people in the chat. This is my favorite movie pretty much of all time. On any given day, when you ask me what my favorite movie is, you'll get a different answer, but this is definitely in the top 5. I remember seeing the trailer on YouTube for Whisperer in Darkness for like 7 years before the movie was out. Is that right?
We did shoot a teaser well before, well in advance of going into production, and then very little of the things we teased with showed up in the movie exactly the way we were teasing back in the earliest days. But
that was a great teaser. I mean, I would watch that over and over, wondering when's this movie coming out, because that was a great teaser.
I want to make sure that we give a shout out sooner rather than later to Davey Robertson, who was the cinematographer and our editor, and the guy who made both Call of Cthulhu and The Whisper in Darkness look as good as they do. That teaser. And Troy Neese wrote original music for that teaser that was actually played by the Bismarck Mandan Symphony Orchestra. That was a live symphony orchestra playing the music for that teaser. We went all out on that teaser, thinking that production would follow shortly thereafter. And then, a couple of years later, it took to actually...
Money? We have to have money to make a film?
Oh, well, that was part of it. Yes,
you have to have a script that everybody agrees on.
Yeah,
that was another
one
big
of the things that I liked the best in that teaser trailer was the Edison wax cylinder that they put into the player to hear the recorded sounds of the aforementioned Whisperer in Darkness, which is now just on a USB drive.
Right.
But still, that's really cool. And yeah, I watched that teaser trailer over and over and over, and I sent it out to everybody that I knew, and I was like, you got to be on the lookout for this. This is going to be great. And it is. I can't get enough of this movie. It's really, like I said, one of my favorite films. The bonus features are awesome, and telling the viewer how you guys dealt with green screen and black and white and all that kind of stuff. And I'm curious, in retrospect, how the both of you feel about the effort in making those films, looking back on it today.
I guess I would, they were deeply gratifying experiences. Andrew and I both come out of a theater background, and working in theater is like being an ice sculptor. You make something that is fundamentally impermanent. And that's one of the really nice things about, working with recorded media like motion pictures or the, radio dramas or any of that stuff. You make it, and people 20 years later can still enjoy it, exactly the same way. So I think for me, at least, it's very gratifying that people are still out there, seeing and discovering these films and enjoying them. Making movies is hard, and making movies with very limited resources is that much harder. I don't think I've done anything in my life more difficult than producing Whisperer was hard. So it was a huge challenge, and it is very nice. It's very gratifying to hear that you enjoyed it, and know that other people have as well. So
it's also, as much as playing the fungi from Yuggoth way back in 1986 changed, our lives, my life anyway, forever. Making the Call of Cthulhu also changed our lives forever, because when we made that movie, we made it because we thought it would be fun. We thought it would be cool. We had no idea, it took us like a year and a half to make it, because we didn't have a budget or a plan in advance. We would build a set and shoot a scene, and then it would take 2 months to build the next set and shoot the next scene. So it took a long time, and we had no idea whether we spent our own money, and we spent as much as we needed and as little as we could get away with, but we had no idea whether we would ever see any of that money back again. And we were astonished when that movie was accepted to the Slam Dance Film Festival and earned its money back in like a month and a half. Wow. And made it possible for me and Sean to become full-time Lovecraft guys. It's, that movie is what made it possible for me and Sean to spend all of our time on Lovecraft instead of it being a hobby. That's what was the turning point to make the HPLHS an actual business. So yeah, making those movies was a game-changing experience.
For all of us. Walter, I wanted to ask you, I know that you have a certain, moratorium isn't the right word, but you don't like to talk too much about ongoing projects. But if you might go into some detail for Andrew and Sean about your current project and how much you understand what they're talking about.
Well, I totally get the part about how difficult it is when you make something on a micro budget. Believe me, that's something universal with all indie filmmakers. I would argue that they're, working on a level even higher than I am budget wise. But your films, the Society's films, have been incredibly inspirational to me. I know. For the confidence of, hey, I can do this. Now, I was a theater kid in high school, which is, you guys will agree, is a subculture to begin with. And then I was in the subculture. Yeah, I was in the subculture of the subculture. Yes. And I was in the film geek section of the theater kids, right? And so I'm guessing you guys messed around with Super 8 when you were younger, of course. right?
There are home movies of me being Colonel Steve Austin, the $6 million man.
Cool.
Yeah.
And
We
Sean,
would make
you played Bigfoot, right?
we'd make Super 8 movies, get them in festivals, and then we all, went our different ways, had a completely different career. So by the time your Call of Cthulhu caught my eye, it was on a shelf in a Barnes and Noble movie section. And I mean, the cover art is just amazing. I was like, whoa, what is this? I was already, pushing 40 years old, and I had reached, no. I had to have been over 40 because it came out in 2005. So, I'm in my 40s, and I grabbed this thing. I look at it and I'm like, this is fantastic. This is so, it was inspiring. And same with Whisper in Darkness. I must have watched Cardinal was talking about the special features. I have watched the special features to Call of Cthulhu several times. I just watched them again a couple weeks ago because I am working on a film project now. And same with Whisper in Darkness. Those special features are just as important as the film when you're a filmmaker, obviously, because all the things you guys go into are the things that people don't realize, what it takes. And there's also that interesting phenomenon that I know you guys have encountered, particularly doing a black and white film, when the young ladies who were the costumers were talking about the wild colors of the clothes, because you're not going to see those colors.
Shooting in black and white, yeah.
Yeah, and she's so right. And how often did you guys experience that thing that you shoot something and then after you're done shooting for the day, you're kind of beating yourself up going, oh, that sucked, that was awful, until you really can get in there and look at it?
Yeah, it's a challenge. It takes a long time to be happy again with things, because I think as a filmmaker, you look at things with a critical eye, and there's still some stuff in both films that I just go, why did we,
right.
And that was just how it either came out that day, or that was the best we could achieve that day, or an aesthetic decision that just maybe wasn't the perfect one, but okay. As Akira Kurosawa said, you don't finish movies, you abandon them, you go, enough already.
I like that.
I'm going to quit messing with it and move on to something else.
And it's stuff that few other people will notice if they do.
Absolutely.
Right. That's the other thing, is you always have to just remind yourself that you are probably the only person who will ever know the difference. So give yourself a break and let it go.
Sure. Well, Cthulhu, your Call of Cthulhu, inspired me back in 2012. I did my first silent homage. I tried to do it like a film that was done in 1927. And I had your Call of Cthulhu, and then in 2010, a buddy said, hey, let's go see The Complete Metropolis, because it was running in theaters. And I fell in love with that movie. Yeah. And I remember I went home that night and I watched your Call of Cthulhu again. And it took me about a year.
Hey, those guys stole half the shots.
What's that?
And said those guys stole half the shots.
Well, I geeked out on both these films for a year, and then I said I want to do a silent movie. And so my new one I'm doing is another period silent film, because what I like is actors don't have to memorize lines. You don't have to worry if an airplane flies overhead, right?
Yep.
So, but I like the
artistic. It was in Call of Cthulhu when I was watching some of the bonus features, and I think somebody came onto the set while you were recording, and then they were all horrified, and somebody said, don't worry about it. It's a silent film. Come on in. Make as much noise as you want.
Yeah.
Another benefit for us, at least in making that movie, is that no one has to pronounce that guy's name or the name of the city where he lives. And if you don't pronounce it, you can't pronounce it wrong. The audience hears it in their imagination the way they think it should sound. So it's always perfect.
Well, one thing I do want to say before I forget about what you guys have done with your films. I was talking about, I was in my 40s when I discovered your Call of Cthulhu and then got this nutty idea to start doing these films. What's great about the indie world in general, and but your film projects in particular is you guys weren't 19 and 20 years old when you did these things. And you know, a lot of times in the arts, people think, you know, well, that's, you know, a young kid's game or whatever. And no, it's not. It's, you know, anybody that can get the resources together can really do some great stuff. And that's one thing I find really inspiring about, you know, you guys doing films. And you know, that's the thing about it, is it really shows what, if you just want to do a film and you put your mind to it, what you can accomplish, because both of them are just really cool, and they're accomplishments. Do you guys have maybe another one in mind that you might do?
You stole my question.
Yeah, I certainly you know, agree with you. There's never been a better time to be a filmmaker, where, you know, your phone is a better camera than you know, hardly any video camera was 15 years ago. You know, you can edit a motion picture on your phone. You can edit a motion picture on a pretty low-end computer. You know, the bar has really been brought way down.
Three lenses now.
To be able to do some, you know, you just have great technology that's small and ubiquitous. So, yeah, we you know, when we went from doing Call of Cthulhu to Whisperer, we increased our ambitions and wanted to do more and do a project that's longer and do one that's sync sound and, you know, a little more user friendly to the traditional audience. And as we looked at projects to do going forward, you know, we are still ambitious and would love to increase the scope of what we take on next. We are kind of butting up against the ceiling of what one can reasonably self-finance, and so we've been moving into the world of you know, how do you make a movie using other people's money, and that's a different gig than when if you're writing the check. Hey, it's your problem. You write the check. You know, you bear the risk. Okay, but when you suddenly, you know, look at something either for film or television, you know, where you're dealing with orders of magnitude more money, it becomes a much more complicated and trickier calculus. So we have a number of projects, you know, that we would love to see take off, you know, but none of the motion picture stuff is at a scale that we would be likely to do in-house. I mean, I guess there are some things that are much smaller ones, but our most ambitious projects are things that would demand outside resources.
At some point, I guess you're also butting up against public domain, right?
Well, public domain's already been on our side, and still is. Although, you know, certainly studio money is not crazy about public domain. They'd rather have something they can buy and own in its entirety, and all derivative rights, and, you know, all of that is of much more interest if you're a you know, a Disney or a, you know, a big studio in terms of owning IP, which can be owned rather than just used.
And Andrew, were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was just going to throw in there that, you know, our friend and collaborator Davey Robertson has recently made another short of his own called Black Goat, and we were happy to, you know, help him out with that. But that's another one where, you know, that was a self-financed thing, but it's part of a much more ambitious overall plan that he'll have to find outside funding for if he wants to produce the rest of the story that he's conceived. But it also is a great case in point of the thing that Sean was saying earlier, how, you know, Dave was able to make a very good looking piece of film using technology that, you know, didn't exist when we made Whisper in Darkness. And, you know, it just goes again to show what a great time it is to be an independent filmmaker, because you can make some spectacular looking stuff if you have Dave's talent and that technology. You can go pretty far.
Absolutely. So I wanted to go ahead and check in with our chat, see who's here and why, or what they have to say. Canadian Spider-Man is in the house. Gap Stargate is here. Hello. Purple Valkyrie is here. Greetings. Tim's Talk is here. Ree is here. Rui is in the house. Anti-derivative Jill is here. Hello. Brian Hepburn, I don't know if I mentioned him earlier. Our good friend Tessa D777 is with us. Hail. Philip Blair is here. And Chris Sevilla says it's always weird seeing people's faces after only knowing their voices. Well, hopefully it's not too weird. And Brett Kramer is in the house. Good to see everybody here. And before we went any further, I just wanted to double check that for our weekly giveaway, you guys are going to be giving away an autographed copy of the audiobook of the complete works of HP Lovecraft. Is that right?
That is
That was the plan. Yep.
Well, thank you very much. That's very generous.
I'm going to go grab one off the shelf so I can hold it up to the camera. I'll be right back.
Okay, cool. And Skogley is here. He says, I'm quiet, but I'm here. We have a lurker in the darkness.
Nice.
Debbie is here. And what I'm going to do is make you big so that we can see the book.
Nice.
So that's
And
the...
is this a numbered edition?
No, not numbered. There it is. So the it's Lovecraft's complete fiction. Sean reads about half of it, and I read about half of it, and all the files come on this nifty custom-made thumb drive that you can plug into your whatever and store in this fancy faux
Book-looking thing.
presentation thing.
We were
Very
going to
nice.
release it on CD, but it would have taken about 45 CDs for the set. So a memory stick seemed a better option, certainly when it comes to shipping.
Yeah.
And that reminds me, speaking of CD, I wanted to ask you what you could tell us about the Dark Adventure radio series.
Sure.
Well, I noticed someone in the chat mentioned how maybe it would be easier to do it as an audio drama, and we agree with you.
Yes. Audio dramas are
Been there,
easier.
done that.
Yeah, we actually, in the space between Call of Cthulhu and Whisperer, we were experimenting with other dead styles of entertainment, and thought it might be interesting to try our hand at doing an audio drama adaptation. So we adapted Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness in the style of an old 1930s radio show, and called it Dark Adventure Radio Theater. And it's like a movie with no picture, but it's a cast of actors and sound effects and original music and a thrilling, leaner adaptation of that particular story. And we went to see if anybody would be interested in it, and it turns out, by jingo, they are. So now, years on, we're right now working on our 25th show in the series. But we've done, some are as long as 7 hours. Some are adaptations of games. Some are straight Lovecraft ones. Some are Lovecraft collaborations. So, and then we package them all. You can get the show as a download or on CD. And then each show includes some props from that particular show. So newspaper clippings, photographs, maps, journal entries, pages from Kulten, you name it. There's
Very
all kinds
cool.
of fun
Yeah.
feelies that come with every show we do.
Those props that the Society puts out are just fantastic. I've always loved those. Do you guys have your own studio? Is that how you do the audio stuff? Or?
We yes and no. We for years we would go and rent studio space. In our current location, our next door neighbor is Robbie Krieger, The Doors, and Robbie has a pretty nice studio.
Sure.
So we can literally book time and just walk next door to record stuff.
There you
We
go.
do have an in-house setup if we only need two or fewer microphones. So for some of the audiobook stuff we do and for the podcast, we generally record those in-house. And then if we've got, 3 or 4 or more actors, we'll go and book studio time. So
things got,
Go
just like for everyone else, things got complicated during the pandemic. We had to record a couple of episodes, using everybody recording from home in their broom closet or whatever. And so it is varied on a show by show basis. The earlier episodes, we recorded a lot of those in the dressing rooms at Theater Banshee, the theater that Sean and his wife Leslie ran at the time. And we've used every kind of recording setup that there has ever been.
We have a question from the chat from NR Jensen Jones. I'd love to hear more about Sean and Andrew's forays into Lovecraft adjacent literature and how they have expanded the interests and focus of the society beyond the works of the old gent himself.
Sure. Yeah, one of the challenges in working in Lovecraft sandbox is eventually you run out of Lovecraft. There are only so many stories, and some of his minor ones, are not great. So
top shelf, yeah.
and some of Shakespeare's plays aren't great.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's as it should be. It would be disturbing if they were all great. So we have widened our lens to look at a lot of the collaborations that Lovecraft worked on, some of which are really terrific stories. We've adapted one Poe story into a Dark Adventure episode, and we continue to look around, that with modern day contributions to the mythos, there are rights issues and ownership issues and things that just make that more complicated than if you look at a Jules Verne story or something that's squarely in the public domain. So, but we realize as we continue to go and continue to produce in this world, that looking at either authors who were of his time or who Lovecraft enjoyed their stories or they otherwise contributed to, and we've done a couple fully original pieces as well that we've had some fun with. And then last, we've also borrowed some stories from the crew, our friends over at Chaosium, who published the role-playing game Call of Cthulhu. We've adapted their campaign Masks of Nyarlathotep as a 7-hour radio drama and adapted their campaign The Brotherhood of the Beast as a radio drama. And I suspect we'll continue to do those as part of the mix too.
I was just going to ask you about and things like this. You guys are putting out a lot of prop documents for stage and for fantasy role-playing and the Call of Cthulhu. And I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about why you got started in that while I try and show some of what you guys have made.
A big part of it is because Sean and I both come from a theater background. Props have always been just integral in our way of thinking about how to present stories. They are, in my opinion, genuinely magical items, as magical as anything real can be, because they exist in the real world and in the imaginary world at the same time. It's a physical bridge into your imagination. So props have, tremendous power to really stir your imagination and focus it and really enrich the storytelling experience. So props, because we started, a live action gaming, we made our own props. Props have always been a key part of our way of interacting with Lovecraftian fiction. And as the years have gone on, we've just, like everything, our ambition keeps growing, and we keep trying to make things.
Our common sense keeps diminishing.
Common sense was abandoned long ago. And yeah, we have just we've always considered props to be a key part of the process, and just a lot of fun. We thought it would be fun has been our guiding principle from the very beginning. So the more
It seems to have stood you in good stead.
so far so good. Yeah.
One other, just to add on to what Andrew was saying about props too. One of the things about the game Call of Cthulhu that is, I think, so special about that game is because it takes place in a parallel universe. It's very much like our world, unlike
Right,
you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, you have to imagine orcs and things like that. But
it's a fantasy universe, but Call of Cthulhu happens in the world we live in.
So because of that, you can make a new clipping from the New York Times that looks like the New York Times, but the information in it is part of the fictitious world of the game, and the two can blend together seamlessly, and that can really heighten it draws players more deeply into the experience of the game, because it must be real, because I have a copy of the New York Times here that says the dead body got up and ran away, or whatever's happening in the story. So the props do have that ability to magically that magical coexistence and an ability to help the participant believe that the experience is real. There's a great one there. Yeah.
When I moved to Los Angeles in 1996, my day job was working for Hollywood prop houses and designing props for movies and TV shows. And there's this huge difference between props that are made for the screen and props that you play with in a game. Because in a movie or TV show, you're only ever going to see as much of that prop as the director wants you to see. So all you have to worry about is the part that the camera is going to look at. And you also are forced to do things in an exaggerated way for the benefit of the camera. Every headline is a screaming, 8-column banner headline like it's World War II all over again. Man gets on bus is a massive headline because the camera has to be able to see it. A gaming prop, however, because there's no camera, that your player is going to hold that item in their own hands and look at every single part of it. A gaming prop has to be designed to an almost, forensic level of detail. Everything has to be realistic. Everything has to be accurate. You have to have just as much realism on the back of that newspaper clipping as you do on the front, because if you're a character in a game who's desperate to understand what the hell is going on, you're going to look for meaning in every detail of that prop. So the props have got to live up to that standard so that they don't take you out of the story. Instead, they pull you further.
Help drive you.
Yeah, I would imagine another difference between a game prop and a film prop. A lot of people don't realize, they're surprised when they find out how fragile film props actually are, right? Because they only have to last while you're shooting, really.
Yeah.
And people see this and they go, "Oh my God, it was that cheap?" Yeah, but a gaming prop is going to be reused theoretically over and over. So you're right; it's got to be a quality in that regard.
They're going to wad it up and shove it in their pocket and run like hell. So it's got to
or lose their sanity entirely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was a big fan of the Mythos collectible card game. I played that. I don't even. For years, do you guys have any experience with Mythos, the card game?
I have never played those card games, sad to say.
Yeah, I'm the same boat for me. I'm not a.
We have a bunch of them in the shrink wrap sitting on the shelf, but we've never cracked them out and started playing.
You should. They're really fun. I'm not a Pokemon player or anything like that. The only collectible card games that I've played have been Illuminati New World Order from Steve Jackson Games and Mythos. And, you get to put your deck together and make sure you have everything that will help reach your goal, and do it before your friend does, or your enemy, or whoever you're playing against. And I really enjoyed that. We do have some other questions in the chat, and I'm just going to touch on a couple of them. Philip Blair asks if H.P. Lovecraft ever corresponded with Charles Fort.
Ooh, good question.
Boy, it'd be fun if he had, but I don't believe there's any surviving letter between the two of them. I don't know. I very much doubt that Fort was aware of Lovecraft's existence. I mean, we know Lovecraft knew who Fort was, but I don't know if it went the other way around.
Now, of course, in The Whisper in Darkness, Fort is a character.
Yeah.
And
Played by Andrew Leman.
there you go. And what you guys did was to sort of finish the unfinished movie script, I suppose, by creating the third act yourselves. Can you walk us through how that worked?
Sure. It took Lovecraft as a writer was not writing dramatic literature. He wasn't writing plays and films and the sort of Aristotelian structure that we as audiences have grown very accustomed to over the last 3,000 years really was of very little interest to Lovecraft. And as a result, a lot of his stories on a dramatic level feel like they kind of fizzle out at the end because A, you've either seen the ending coming for the last 50 pages and all he does is confirm what you were pretty sure you already knew, or the character, faints or runs away, or there's some other...
By Lovecraft's own admission, he didn't care about human beings, and he didn't care about their personal problems or journeys or feelings or anything. And drama, for better or for worse, is pretty much about people. So if you're trying to take a story that doesn't even bother to name the people who are in it and turn it into as Sean was saying, an Aristotelian dramatic structure, you've got to do something.
And generally speaking, as an audience, we are inculcated to be used to this sense of, rising action. This is something your English teacher probably told you about, and then a climax where the story hits a sort of a point of no return, and then a denouement from where there's a final resolution of it. And a lot of times, Lovecraft would get to the rising action, and then sort of I fainted, or I woke up, or the window. Whatever it might be. So in looking at The Whisper in Darkness, one of the things we wanted to do was try and give it a more dramatic, more cinematic ending. And where in the story, it is very creepy when Wilmarth's suspicions are sort of confirmed in finding the face of Andrew Akeley. But then Lovecraft gives us nothing after that. So what did he do then? And I think as a audience pursuing a cinematic or dramatic experience, we want to know, well, what did you do then? How did our hero get out of? Because he's still in a kind of difficult situation. What did he do? So we wanted to ratchet the tension up from that point, let him try and take action to solve his own situation, and then let the situation resolve itself from there. So
I love the kind of dark humor, and here's a spoiler on Whisper in Darkness, folks, so plug your ears.
That's only been out for what?
10 years, 11 years now.
11 years, yeah.
When they drop the girl.
Spoiler warning, if you want a copy of Whisper in Darkness, just mute for the next minute.
Because that never happens in Hollywood movies. The mom just pick up the kid and there you go. I'm like, oh, beautiful. That's really dark, but I love it. Will Matt Foyer appear in the next film if you guys do the next film?
Well, Matt is a dear friend of ours and a really terrific actor. So, I don't know that we want to only make films starring Matt Foyer. He is very much a Lovecraftian protagonist. Matt looks like an academic. He's a very smart guy. He speaks like an academic, and when you watch him, I think he's plausible as that type of guy. So I don't know that that he'll always get the leading part, but you know, he's done a bunch of the radio dramas with us as well, and we count ourselves lucky to be.
Well, again,
able
you
to work
talk
with
about
that.
the special features. It is hilarious when you've watched the film, and then you watch the special features of the making. Just watching
Yeah.
Matt and his reactions and the salty language, but that just
Yeah.
cracks me up.
We
It's just, oh, we're so
we
effing
put Matt
wet.
through a few. We put Matt through a few ordeals.
We
We're
sprayed
very-
an awful lot of cold water on the
We're
man.
very lucky that he continues to play with us.
Have you
Oh my
guys thought
goodness.
about hosting at least just one time, maybe a festival through the society? Or
That is an idea we've kicked around for a while. You know, we tend to go to Lovecraftian events wherever they may be. So this summer we'll be at Gen Con, which is the big gaming convention in Indianapolis, and then we'll be at Necronomicon Providence in Providence, Rhode Island in August. And we've thought about, there was a Lovecraft Film Festival
Right.
here in the Los Angeles area.
3 years.
Yeah, and
And there's
we've
another one in
cons-
Providence, Rhode Island, right?
Yep, they do it there as well, and up in Portland, Oregon too. And when it fizzled out though in Los Angeles, we've considered bringing it back. Our plates are pretty full these days.
Sure.
But there is a part of us that go, it would be fun to sponsor
Yeah.
our own event.
Yeah,
When I first saw Whisper, it was at the that fest where you guys first screened it at that back in 2011.
Yeah, sure.
So the first viewing on the big screen was just awesome, particularly
Yeah, that
after
was a
waiting
great-
after that great trailer.
Yeah, that was a great theater to see it in too. The
Yeah.
Warner Grand
San
down in
Pedro, yeah.
It's a great movie palace.
I have another question for you each. Lovecraftian's personal beliefs have made him a controversial figure in the modern era. Why have you chosen to stick by him rather than cancel him? And do you think fans can reconcile enjoying his work when his personal beliefs are so objectionable?
yeah. It is tricky, and it's something that we have been wrestling with for a long time. You know, when my own first experience, it didn't occur to me that Lovecraft was racist for a long time, which goes to show you the ingrained nature of it, and my own position of being a white guy myself. You're just blind to some of these things, but once you start to see it, boy, it's there, and you sort of have to come to terms with it somehow.
And it's more evident in his correspondence than in his
Oh,
fiction,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, his correspondence, I think it's important for people to remember, was private, or was intended to be private. He'd be so freaked out to know that not only was his private correspondence published, but a couple guys go and talk about it on the internet every month. It would be very troubling to him. But I think if you grapple with really any artist, probably from before 1950 and certainly before 1900. They're all operating from a worldview which is very different than our own. And I think at some point, we as consumers of art or literature or really much of anything, architecture, have to be able to separate the creator from their creations. And I think it's fully, you don't have to agree with Shakespeare or believe what he believed to say Hamlet is a great play.
Right.
You don't have to agree at all with an author to be able to appreciate their work. And I think that's that's possible with Lovecraft, to appreciate the work on its own merits and just simply say, this is somebody whose personal opinions I don't agree with. And, we get why some people go, I don't like him, what he was into. I don't want to read his works. Hey, that's absolutely your right to do that. And we're not saying Lovecraft should be public school curricula anywhere. No, it's something that people choose to enjoy it. I think they can get a lot from it. And you certainly don't have to agree with the worldview of a creator to appreciate their creation.
Well, one thing that on that issue that you guys would know this better than I, weren't most of his troublesome commentary and opinions earlier than later in his life? My understanding is that at some point he began to change a little bit.
Well, he married a Jewish woman. I was raised in a Reformed Jewish household, and I found it interesting that he married a Jewess. That relationship was kind of long distance and not very long, but he was kind of notoriously anti-Semitic as well as being racist. But yeah, do you guys think that mellowed with time?
You know, he was a human being who learned and grew over time. So it's true that his views changed over his lifetime. It's not like they changed 180 degrees, though. He was still racist and anti-Semitic the day he died. You know, his political views were changed a lot by the Great Depression.
Yeah, politics and economics. He did a huge shift from the Lovecraft of, you know, World War I era to the Lovecraft of the Great Depression. You know, there he changed quite a bit, but unfortunately, some of his beliefs, I think, and opinions that people would find odious in the modern era were not ones that he ever abandoned later in his life.
I think that, you know, it's important. A lot of people say, oh, well, he was a man of his time, and he was a man of his time. But the point is that his times and our times have some disturbing similarities.
A little overlap? Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter to me what Lovecraft thought, because he's dead and he cannot change or grow and affect anyone. What matters is what we think of racism. So I think it's worth continuing to engage with even the more difficult parts of Lovecraft's legacy, because it helps us, you know, confront the racism that still exists and that we still have to grapple with if we want to live in a society with other people. You know, it doesn't matter what Lovecraft thought about anything. What matters is what we who are still alive and can still change the world think about it. So it's worth continuing to grapple with it rather than just cancel him and say, well, he was a jerk and therefore I will not read anything he wrote. Maybe instead read what he wrote and think about it, and think about the context in which he wrote it, and face the fact that we still are wrestling with these issues.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I say often, because my channel is a kind of a pop culture channel, is that it's the work that's important, not necessarily the person that was behind it. Those two can be separated, as you said earlier, Sean. And it's easy to get into reading Lovecraft, or indeed watching an HP Lovecraft film, without getting too deep into the creator's political beliefs or in this case racism, that kind of thing. But we want to try and bring the good things about that person's work forward, while not necessarily advancing their ideological.
To read someone's work is not to endorse their worldview. It is
right.
Exactly.
I was at the dog park over the weekend with my dogs, and I was wearing a Lovecraft t-shirt, as I often am. And a woman who must have been 60 or 65, who was there with her dog, came up to me and said, "Oh, I love Lovecraft. My favorite story is Polaris." She said, like, my favorite short story by anyone is Polaris by HP Lovecraft. And I thought, that is a deep cut, because I don't think anyone would say Polaris was the best Lovecraft story. So it was a very interesting, you never know who you're going to end up talking to when you're wearing an HP Lovecraft t-shirt, that's for sure.
What do you guys think of, are you familiar with Peter Levenda's book, The Dark God?
I don't know it. I know Peter Levenda, but I don't know the Dark God.
Well, then, are you familiar with how he's presented the similarities between the specifics of Call of Cthulhu and what Aleister Crowley wrote in one of his Libers years before?
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people have tried to make the argument of Lovecraft as either unwitting occultist or actual occultist, or that he was simply, almost channeling, these otherworldly forces. I know Lovecraft himself would have vehemently rejected such a notion, but
or dramatizing something that Crowley claimed was true. That was the the other possibility.
Arthur Conan Doyle believed that Harry Houdini was capable of doing real magic. It's often the
But he
case.
also believed in fairies.
Yeah, Arthur Conan Doyle believed a lot of rather silly things. But the point is that people will often just not get it and assume that what an author writes is more real than that author would ever claim it to be.
Right. Well, just imagine if I'm thinking that intrigued me when I read the Lavenda book, because I thought, my gosh, what if Call of Cthulhu is a true story?
One of the things we enjoy saying is that all of Lovecraft stories are based on a true story. I mean, The Whisper in Darkness starts off with these floods that actually happened, and
the earthquake in Call of Cthulhu.
And At the Mountains of Madness. I mean, everything Lovecraft predicted in At the Mountains of Madness has turned out to be true. The more you dig under the ice in Antarctica, the more you discover Lovecraft was on to something. So it's a running gag around here that all of Lovecraftian fiction is based on a true story. Yeah.
For a guy that only left town to visit Robert E. Howard, he was a very worldly guy.
Yeah.
Speaking of, you bring up Howard, and I was going to ask a question within the context of Clark Ashton Smith. In what I've read, I haven't seen it, but did Lovecraft ever express an opinion or a thought on the disappearance of Ambrose Bierce?
I think of the Adolphe de Castro and Bierce connection, but I don't think anything about the disappearance of Bierce.
Because Smith, as you know, I'm forgetting the guy's name, he was a poet and a protege of Bierce, was going to facilitate very young Smith meeting Bierce, because Bierce did review one of his poems and published it before he disappeared. But of course, that never happened because he disappeared. And I've always been curious about, if Clark Ashton Smith ever got any kind of inside information on that and shared it with Lovecraft, perhaps, or I've just been curious, because that seems like Bierce's whole disappearance would be perfect fodder for Lovecraft.
Yeah, that would be a good question for our colleague Scott Connor, who is Mr. Clark Ashton Smith. So I'll have to remember to put that to him. But Lovecraft did a bunch of revision work for a client who just drove him crazy, a guy named Adolphe Danziger de Castro. And one of de Castro's pieces was he had apparently briefly known Bierce in person, and then had written apparently a long and somewhat dubious recollections of his time with Bierce, and Lovecraft was very dismissive of that piece of writing anyway. But I don't think the actual disappearance was something he ever. I think the film From Dusk Till Dawn 3, The Hangman's Daughter, was based on the de Castro story, I think.
You're correct.
And I'm telling you, Michael Parks as Ambrose Bierce was just fantastic. But that third Dusk Till Dawn film, it kind of had that Lovecraftian feel to it, because the whole ancient lost aspect of it, ancient lost civilization aspect of it. But
another question I have for you both. Lovecraft's writings can be considered cosmic horror, science fiction, pulp, satire, and even prose poetry. What exactly would you say is the genre of which we may or may not be looking at Lovecraft to be a master of?
Lovecraft's writing certainly, he got in on the ground floor of pop culture before a lot of these genres had been, crystallized. So his work really does fit into a bunch of different categories.
He used the expression weird fiction. Yeah. And that's a pretty darn good one, I think. It's sort of thing like, what is it? It's like pornography. I know it when I see it. Weird fiction. Could it have been published in Weird Tales? It's some sci-fi, and it's some horror, and it's some fantasy, and it's a kind of a collision of these disparate, what we now often think of as disparate elements, but during his time was, weird fiction would embrace all of Robert E. Howard's work and Clark Ashton Smith and his comfortably under that umbrella. So
I think for our own, our own take on all of it, again, I might say that, fun has always been more important. It's like, I personally am not actually a particular fan of horror fiction in general. I don't read a lot of other horror authors. I don't watch a lot of horror movies. A lot of the more recent horror films seem to be, torture porn more than horror. And that just does not float my boat at all. But the thing about Lovecraft that always has really appealed to me is what you mentioned a minute ago, Walter, about, this sense of lost civilizations and this sense of forbidden knowledge and secrets just beyond our reach. That's the stuff that has always really fascinated me about Lovecraft stuff. And I don't know if that constitutes a genre. I also think we've always looked at it with a little bit of a sense of humor too, that I don't know that Lovecraft thought of his own stuff with any particular sense of humor, but we've always tried to find the humor in it because that's part of the fun for us.
Well, I find it interesting that Robert Barlow, who became the executor of his literary estate, right?
Yeah.
I think, after his influence and friendship with Lovecraft in his youth, he goes on to be an archaeologist of Mesoamerican, civilizations. I've always found that to be really intriguing. It's in your mind, you're like, ooh, what did he learn, or what did he think that he learned from Lovecraft, or something Lovecraft said that made him, go pursuing these things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think there's an appreciation for the ancient and unknown, as at least in terms of the kind of work that Barlow was doing.
Yeah.
Another question for you guys. Again, each of you have your own take, I'm sure. Will the Lovecraftian genre material ever really succeed in the mainstream, and would it be good if it did?
Boy, we've been trying. Other people have been trying. They made that, HBO took a whack at it with Lovecraft Country, and that they threw a lot of money at that, and it didn't get picked up for a second season.
True Detective, that's
True
a different
Detective?
story. The first season of True Detective was great.
Yeah.
Lovecraftian without intending to be.
Lovecraft
they did intend to be. They mentioned the King in Yellow. They dropped
That's
the King
Chambers,
in Yellow's
though.
name several times.
Remember, though, Robert W. Chambers is the originator of the King in Yellow.
Yeah.
Lovecraft himself acknowledged my stuff is not popular and never will be. It does not cater to popular taste or interest. If you want it to cater to popular taste and interest, you have to unlovecraftify it to some degree, generally speaking. And if you do that in order to make it popular in the mainstream, is it really Lovecraft anymore? That's a question that we will continue to wriggle with, I suspect.
He may remain for a long time an inspiration to others who do the weird fiction type of material.
That's certainly how he's currently manifesting in so much of pop culture, that you see Cthulhu on South Park, and you see Lovecraft Country, and you see Lovecraft adjacent, Lovecraft inspired, rather than the actual an actual straight up adaptation of his stuff. And having adapted almost all of his major works now, we can say it's tricky. It's tricky to strike a tone that meets, again, our expectations with regards to drama, keeps what we love and cherish about, his language and atmosphere, and sense of suspense and the weird. So it's a fine line to walk.
It's and actually Cardinal brought up a good point with the True Detective season 1. I think that, which he's right, that's heavily Lovecraft influenced, even though Chambers is the one who originated the character. But the way what Pizzolatto was inspired by with that, I think True Detective season 1, unless I'm forgetting something, has probably been the most seriously dramatic adaptation, you might say. That's not genre. It's in the crime drama genre, so to speak. But so it shows that those concepts can really work. That Lovecraft's influence can really work in what grown-ups call serious drama, not genre entertainment, because that was brilliant, and it was brilliant greatly because of that thread running through it, I think.
And because it was very good storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
as opposed to some other
well done.
Properties we might not mention out loud. We did have a question here I'm looking for. Regarding mainstream Lovecraft, his use of language alone guarantees some modern audiences will find it inaccessible. We discussed that earlier. And from Philip Blair in the chat, he asks, how closely did Lovecraft follow the scientific frontiers of his day?
Lovecraft was would love to have been a scientist himself. He aspired to be an astronomer. But found that once he got to higher levels of it, he couldn't do the math that was requisite to go on to to study it at a high level. But he followed, he avidly read the papers. He was very well informed. He followed scientific publications in a number of different disciplines. And I think particularly for a layperson who never graduated high school, was, incredibly well informed about trends in the sciences, at least at a non-professional level that were going on through his lifetime.
He also, however, was occasionally dismissive of cutting-edge science. I mean, I think he thought Einstein's theories were incomprehensible to him, and I think he made fun of them on more than one occasion. I think, like a lot of people, he considered things like telephones and radios to be fads that would not amount to anything. So he, while on the one hand he really respected science and knew a lot about it, he also had at least one foot very firmly stuck in the past and didn't necessarily see the potential for what science was leading to.
Well, he was kind of technologically adverse.
Yeah,
I think it's a lot of the applied science that didn't do much for Lovecraft, and things like geology and paleontology and things that dealt with the fixed sciences were, I think, of more appeal to him than advances in electronics and engineering and things of that nature.
We did touch base on this before, but I'd like to open the floor to you guys to tell us what is coming up for the HPLHS.
Well, I'll start with
whatever you can tell me without having to kill me.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm stalling so I can go through. What can I say and what can I not say? So, fans of Dark Adventure Radio Theater may realize it's been longer than usual since we've released an episode, but we have a big new Dark Adventure project that we've been working on for almost 2 years now that hopefully will make its way to the public by the end of this year. But this is one of the first times we're doing a collaboration with folks, so it's not a purely in-house matter. So that's partly why we don't talk about it a lot and don't necessarily know when it will be released, because it's not entirely up to us. But we're trying to use new technologies and push the experience of an audio adventure in a way that, in a manner, it's never really been pushed before. And it's an experimental thing. We don't entirely know how it'll all work out, but it should be good fun. And then we do have additional episodes of Dark Adventure Radio Theater in a more traditional format that will be coming out. Also, hopefully by late this year, we'll at least have another more traditional show that will be available. So
we're also very actively in the process of finalizing the 3 books that are a part of the Miskatonic Missives Kickstarter that we launched earlier this year. Those should all be going to press, early May. Hopefully by the end of this month, the books themselves will be finalized and go to the printer. And then there's a bunch of add-on and bonus things that we're also very close to finalizing. There are, the global supply chain mess
situation
that is affecting everyone will affect the printing and distribution of those books. We've been butting up against that with the prop set that we just recently released, the Call of Cthulhu Classic prop set. It's just hard to get the paper that we need to print stuff on. So there's going to be some delay in those books just for the sake of trying to get the paper. We've even had trouble getting samples of the paper that we want to print all the bonus stuff on. So it's very much in the works. Sean and I we spent most of this morning doing an editorial pass on the most recent version of the books, and we hope to get those out before the end of the year as well.
We're working with the team over at Chaosium.
Yes,
we have a couple different things in the game world that's turned out to be a really great relationship with that whole team over there. So we have a couple different things that we're in conversations about, in addition to we're fulfilling the orders that we got for this second prop set that is now shipping. So that's been a lot of fun. And, the whole gaming corner of the Lovecraftian experience is one that's very, very lively and active, and, a lot of fans all over the world and people who really enjoy that game. And I think, the game is in very good hands with the current management team there, and they have some very fun things in the works, and we look forward to continuing to work with them on some of the different things that are coming down the pipeline there.
One of the things I really like about the Dark Adventure Theater CDs is that you can order them on your website, either just the CD or with props. And as I'm from a theater background, as are the rest of you, I think that's really cool. And another question that I had was, two actually that come to mind. One, do you see a possibility of getting this kind of thing involved with Audible at any point? And I'll reserve my second question until you're done.
All right, I'll go. We've been working with Audible for a while now. All of the Dark Adventure titles that are currently out are available through Audible. Our audiobooks as well. We've done both the complete works of Lovecraft. We also did this past year a new audiobook called The Literature of Lovecraft, in which we took a set of around 50 or so stories that Lovecraft liked and wrote about in a variety of places, and said, told his friends and his students, you should read this story, you should read this one, you should read that one. So we took 50 of those and recorded them as audiobooks, it's called The Literature of Lovecraft. It's available through the HPLHS, but it's also available on Audible. So for
but
folks
of course,
who are,
we should buy it from your website.
We definitely prefer that, but hey, it's if buying it from Audible is definitely better than not buying it at all. So there you go.
The other thing about Audible is that you'll get the audio portion of the show, but you won't get all the props and feelies and bonus stuff that you get if you get it straight.
Yeah, that's a download only experience. So
yeah,
right. And it kind of goes without saying that if you're working with Audible, that's sort of big time.
Yeah, they're Audible's part of Amazon, and they're a big company. So yeah, and we do we are continuing to dial things up. This kind of secret audio project, we've brought in a celebrity host for it and things like that. So we are trying to find ways to reach wider audiences and cast our net as broadly as we can to bring as many people to the fun as we can.
Absolutely. And again, I don't want to put Walter on the spot too much, but this is the 20th anniversary year of his publishing company, the Lost Continent Library, and he publishes his own books as well as a few other authors, and knows a thing or two about writing books and investigating. And I was curious if there was anything, Walter, that you were interested in asking either Sean or Andrew about regarding that.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, that could be a whole other conversation when I put my publisher hat on, asking these guys questions about their experiences.
Let's have a whole other conversation.
It's like the Audible experience. I got people asking me, hey, you going to do the audio books? And from what I hear, at least Audible sounds like they're not able to hack the file and put it out there. So it's something I'm going to explore. But I'm a very small press, micro press guy. I started the label in 20 years ago, October of 2002, and I made the jump to including nonfiction when I started writing nonfiction, and that's been the lion's share of what's kept me alive as a publisher. Have you guys found that? I mean, you're dealing in Lovecraft, so that's a big name in this genre. But have you found that as the years have gone on, there is any less sales in fiction than there used to be? It seems like there's a lot of folks out there, a growing demographic, and folks that for whatever reason, blame the internet, I guess, is fiction is something they should get for virtually nothing or nothing. Have you guys come up against that in what you put out there?
I guess I wouldn't articulate it quite that way, but we don't really have the sort of fiction nonfiction delineation in our world that you tend to. Something actually that gives me a little bit of hope is I can certainly remember right after Call of Cthulhu came out and sort of in the late aughts of hearing when you have a copyrighted work and it's people are pirating it or giving it away or whatever, you are constantly playing whack-a-mole to try and extinguish all the embodiments of that you could find. And there was a lot of pushback of people going, why are you doing that? I bought the movie. It's mine. I could give it to whoever I want. Right. Sort of thing. And that sort of attitude that came with the early days of Napster and people trying to hoard free music, just not even because they wanted it, just because they could. In a lot of ways, I think, younger consumers have kind of gotten on the other side of that and actually do perceive value to movies or music or books. And even if they are things that only have an electronic existence, they still have value. And I think for a while, some people had a hard time making that intellectual leap. It's like, I can copy it for free. It must be free, And I think that's going away less. And people go, oh yeah, I should. This is still a thing. I should buy it, and the prices are usually reasonable. So why shouldn't I buy the ebook? Why shouldn't I pay for the song I want? So that's my perception anyway. I don't know. What do you think?
That's a good point. Yeah.
I also think that for Call of Cthulhu and Whisper in Darkness, both, it has not been easy for us to get them into the sort of streaming space. We worked with the distributor early on, and every distributor we've ever worked with has turned out to be a very unpleasant circumstance. They go bankrupt and leave you high and dry. Your rights are locked up, and you can't even get access to your own thing. And most people nowadays, expect to be able to stream the movies that they want to watch. So many people don't even own an optical drive or a disc player of any kind. It's like, I can only get your movie on disc. What use is that to me? So, trying to meet the sort of market expectation, how people expect to get their content. We continue to try to find a way to get our movies into the most convenient watching form for the audience, but
without paying for that privilege.
Yeah.
My bad experience with a distributor I had once, I won't do this again, is they never got any of my books distributed. And then when we ended the relationship, they charged me for the storage fees.
Right.
So I was never again. But the thing that really helped me with putting it on the map was I did for a year and a half, I did an electronic magazine that was free. It was free to download. And I looked at that as the effort I went into doing that was my advertising expense. And that was the best advertising I ever did because it put my label kind of on, it was on the edge, but it was on the map in the pulp, world. That's and my own effort doing that, putting something out there for free, because you're right, in that era, this was in 2008, 2009, just smack dab in that era when there were people who really wanted stuff for free. So I said, okay, I'll do this magazine, and did a heck of a job on it. It was really popular for about a year in its world. And I found that just kind of taking the bull by the horns, when, like, you guys have done that. You guys have, with the society, you're like, well, let's do this, let's do that. And it's not necessarily what everybody else was doing. It's what you guys wanted to do, like with the props and the radio shows and stuff. And I would say now there's probably others who are out there maybe looking at your model to emulate.
Sorry.
Exactly. I feel a little bad about that, but
every time
we success.
Every time we do a project, and it comes to a conclusion, we turn to each other and say, "Let's never do it that way again."
Oh, that's good.
Lessons learned.
Yeah.
This is kind of an off-the-wall question, but as I'm a fantasy role-playing geek and I've written a dozen of my own games, I was curious to ask both of you how long you were into LARPing and when the last time you LARPed was.
We, I think our first LARP game, that was like 1984 or something, was the first one. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So
we were still in high school, so yeah, it must have been like the summer of 1984, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was when we started doing it, and it was something both Andrew and I did quite a bit of through all the years we've known each other. Andrew and I have never gone to school at the same place. So we when we were living in Colorado, we were producing games in both our respective colleges.
Right.
We both went to different graduate schools, and we both kind of got gaming groups going at both of our graduate schools, and then did a couple games once Andrew moved back to California, or moved to California. I guess the last game would have been at the thing in Stockholm, I think
you're probably right.
The Thing in Stockholm sounds like a Lovecraft title.
Yeah, it should be. So, there was a Lovecraft convention in Stockholm in, it had to be after Shoggoth, I don't know, 2003? Was it before Call? No, they showed Call of Cthulhu, so it must have been after that. Didn't they show Call of Cthulhu?
Did they?
I don't know.
Well, let's just say they did.
Let's say they did. I don't know. So somewhere in the probably the first half of the 2000s, 2004, 2005.
We went though because they were doing Shuggathon on the Roof live on stage.
Right. Well,
Right.
Maybe they didn't show Call of Duty.
I don't think
With
they went because they were screening the movie. We went because they were doing that musical live on stage in Swedish.
Yeah, they did a full stage production of it. It was crazy.
It was
did you have an interpreter, or did they have a screen that had the
Nope.
English or anything?
It was
lost in Swedish.
Just in Swedish. But of course we had written it, so we were pretty familiar with it, even when all the words were unintelligible to us. So,
but as part of that festival, we agreed to run a live action game in Stockholm. It was pretty fun.
And
but
the game was in English.
The game
was in English. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Lovecraft fans in Sweden.
At some point, our live action gaming became so elaborate that it was like doing the work of producing a short film, because we had costumes and props and sets and locations and special effects and all kinds of stuff. And it was like the only people who are enjoying this are the 15, 20 people who are directly involved. And once it's over, it's like a theater production. It's nothing but a memory. We're doing all the work and spending a fair amount of money. We might as well point a camera at this and turn it into movies. And that's sort of how we made the transition from LARPing to filmmaking. And then, as with everything we've ever done, it just spun out of control.
Michael Beacom from the chat points out that per Wikipedia, the Stockholm event was 2005.
What is Wikipedia?
Wikipedia knows. Yeah.
If that's helpful, I'm not sure.
I believe it.
Miskatonicon. That was, I think.
Miskatonicon. Yeah. One of the folks that's been on Masters of the Genre before a couple of times has been the science fiction writer Paul D. Filippo. Are you familiar with him?
Know of him, but
can't say the name, but I don't know him personally.
He lives in Providence, in the shadow of Lovecraft, as he puts it. And I just thought I'd see if you guys had any kind of connection before we brought on one of our mods to help us spin the wheel for the giveaway. So, calling all mods, let's go ahead and get somebody in here to help us with that. And I'm just going to double check and make sure that they have the link to join us. And they do now. Are there any questions for either of you that I haven't asked that you wish I would have asked, or that you'd like to touch on, any ideas or anything that we haven't covered so far?
I feel pretty well covered.
Okay, fair enough. And speak of the devil, here is Antiderivative Jill. Hello, Jill.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Not bad. I understand that you think this is a pretty nifty idea.
Well, yeah, this whole thing that you're doing, I've only read a few of Lovecraft's short stories, and he can really paint a gripping narrative, and it's just, I'm impressed with how creative you've been with his work and how dedicated you are to making it accessible.
Well, thanks. We do think
really
sharing the fun with anything you like in life, it's like, why not bring as many people into it as you can, and hopefully some of them will find as much enjoyment as you have.
Well, yeah, I have, just listening to you guys talk about it. And you mentioned you were turning games into audio dramas. How extensive is your work with the video games? Have you considered reversing that and turning something you've authored into a game?
Yes. There's a storytelling is largely what we do in one way or another. And to us, role-playing games are one type of storytelling, and video games are a type of storytelling, and audio dramas are, and motion pictures are. And we are very interested in that point of collision where I think one of the cool things in a video game is it's participatory. You are in on it. It's not objectified. And so we've been kind of playing around with some new technologies to try and make it sort of is to get back to that LARP kind of experience where it's more immersive because you are not. It's interactive and it's personal because you are in the story and affecting its outcome.
Role-playing games, be they tabletop or live action, are collaborative. It's more than storytelling; it's collaborative story creation. When we ran, live action games, Sean and I and Phil and the other people who ran them, we would write these elaborate plots and have all these plans, and we'd prepare these special effects, and then the players would go and choose to do something else, something we had not anticipated, something we were not prepared for. And rather than force them into the plot we had pre-created, we, whenever we could, ran with what they decided to do. And it opened up, whole parts of the story that hadn't even occurred to us at the time, but were fascinating and all the more gripping because the players themselves were generating that plot line, even when it meant I ended up, getting shot 5 times and ended up dying in the backyard of the house where the thing was happening. It's okay. That's what you want to do. It's not how I would have ended the story, but that's okay. And that's part of what's so much fun about those interactive forms of not just storytelling, but story making, where, the audience is part of the process, crucial to the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, I think the very last fantasy role-playing game that I ran was Vampire the Masquerade, and it was just a tabletop FRP. But one of the things I liked about it the most, as opposed to, Dungeons and Dragons and Champions and all that kind of stuff, was that the play was the thing. It was more about how you portray your character, how you act out what's happening, rather than indices and matrices and the rolling of dice and all that kind of stuff. And I spent, between 4 and 6 hours a week writing what would inevitably end up being a 2 or 3 hour long game. And that was, again, sort of narrowly focusing, the players into what I'd already come up with. So, all right. Do we have the wheel all ready to go, Jill? You're muted. Hey there, Jill.
I'm sorry about that. I had to step away and deal with a little person.
No worries. Are we ready to spin the wheel for the giveaway?
Yes, I have shared the wheel.
Okay. We'll bring it in.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I always feel a little nauseous when I see my head going around like that. Herc130 says, I came here just to see Cardinal Spin's head spin around. So, in your own time, Jill, please let her rip. Scogely. Congratulations.
Awesome name.
So I am going to put my email address into the chat here.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And Scogely, if you will get in touch with me at gil@sunflower.com with your information, I will get it to
get it over to us and we'll dispatch something post haste.
Yeah.
And that's such a beautiful prize, too.
Yeah, it really is. It's wonderful. And before we wrap up altogether, I just wanted to give Walter a chance to ask any questions that he hasn't asked, or make observations or whatever, because he's my expert co-host.
Well, I think I asked the questions that I had thought of, but again, it was great to sit in with Cardinal on this, because, like I said, I've really liked, since I discovered you guys when I learned about Call of Cthulhu, the Call of Cthulhu film, and it's just been totally cool. Couple of hours to sit in and get a chance to meet you and talk and ask some questions. So. I'm out here in California as well, so maybe we'll run into each other somewhere out there. And, thanks again, and thanks for letting me be part of the conversation.
Our pleasure, Walter. Thank you.
Yeah,
Sure.
if you're in Glendale, come on by Glorious headquarters here, and we'll be happy to show you around.
Will do.
Okay.
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, we do
All
have a
right.
real brick and mortar place.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's open to the public, so really people can come by. So
I've been meaning to get to it, and now I have to make sure I do.
All right.
How
I
far is
will do.
Glendale from you,
Been looking
Walter?
forward to it.
How far is Glendale from you, Walter?
Well, I live out in the IE. I'm at my son's place in Torrance this week, which is only across town, and I'm about an hour drive without traffic. If I take the 210 and hit it at the right time, I'm zipping right up there and doing it in about 50 minutes. So it's close enough.
Well, I think you guys all have each other's emails by now, so I'll let you take care of that.
Be in touch.
you know,
yeah,
as you will. I'll have to fly out because I'm in Kansas, but I'll make it.
all right, we'll be here.
Cool.
And I want to thank Jill again for coming on and helping us with the wheel, and
You're welcome.
everybody in the chat, and of course our wonderful guests tonight. It's been really a treat for me, Andrew, Sean, to have you on. I hope we can lure you back again, maybe at a time when you guys have something going on that you'd like to
That we are actually allowed to talk about.
talk about. And for folks that do want to get in touch with you, or maybe buy a t-shirt or some other kind of merch, they can just go to CthulhuLives.org, right?
Or even HPLHS.org, or just Google up Lovecraft Historical. We'll come up. So we're easy to find.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Call of Cthulhu
Very
movie
good.
guys, whatever. Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do it for Masters of the Genre number 12. Thanks again, everybody. And it's Cardinal Sin